Let's begin. Do you know the biggest determinant of whether a book is a bestseller or not? It's the author's ability to execute the beats of the genre in a way that the reader has never seen before. And notice there are two elements in what I just said. First of all, you have to execute all the beats of the genres that you're working in. And second, you have to do them in such a unique way that you stand out from the crowd. In other words, you stand out from everyone else writing in your form, because that is your true competition. You're not competing against everybody writing, the people in your form. Hi, everybody. I'm John Truby, and I want to welcome you to Bestselling Genre Beats. The main thing I teach in the writer's studio that I have back in Los Angeles is how to write genre stories that sell to a worldwide market. And I've developed a lot of techniques to help you write bestsellers in every genre, and I want to share some of the key genre beats and techniques with you today. My promise to you is that you will learn powerful genre beats and techniques that will allow you to stand out from everyone else working in your form. And this means that you're on your way to creating your unique story brand, which is the ultimate goal of every writer at this conference. And if it isn't, it should be. Because that is what gives you more sales, more fans, and more money for all of your work. Now, to help you master these genre beats and stand out from the crowd, I've created some worksheets. And you can download them at rebrand.ly/Truby genres. So let's start with the bottom line. To write a book that can break through the clutter and become a bestseller, it has to have a massive amount of plot. To give you an idea, people who talk about 3 acts in a screenplay say that you need 2 to 3 major plot beats. Well, that's not even close. A screenplay that sells will have 10 or more major plot beats in the story. A best-selling novel will have 5 times that amount. And you can multiply that by at least 3 times if you're writing a novel series. So clearly, you have to have a story with an exponential increase in plot and intense narrative drive to win. So how do you create the massive amount of plot required to get you to the top of the bestseller list? It begins with the second secret of plot, which is genres. You might say, well, what was the first secret of plot? Did I come in late? No, that was yesterday. My class, How to Become a Plot Magician. And it's a great secret. It determines everything you do as a writer when it comes to plot. So if you were not able to be at that session, check it out. It will be very helpful to you. Now, the only way that a novelist can gain maximum success is to play by the 3 unwritten rules of genre that determine worldwide story today. And here's rule number 1. The story business doesn't buy writers. It's in the business of buying and selling genres. Now, why are genres the key to indie novel success? Well, genre is a type of plot, like action, romance, crime, fantasy. But even more important, genres are the all-stars of the story world. And they make up 99% of all novels sold today. That's why the entertainment business, including all publishers, buys and sells them. And that's why your customers buy the books that they buy. Now, another great advantage to genres is that each one is a plot system that has already been worked out. That is a huge advantage for you. Each genre has 10 to 15 unique plot beats that must be in your story. And if they are not in your story, it will not be successful. For example, a romance without the first dance will have romance readers up in arms, and you don't want that. That's why you have to know your genres better than anyone else working in your forms. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, I know all about genres. I call them tropes. Actually, that's a big mistake. Misconception number one about genres is that writers think that genres are the same as tropes. They are not the same. A trope is an individual story unit, such as a type of character like the bad boy. Only the genre has the sequence of all the plot beats, not one, all the plot beats in the proper order that blows the reader's mind. That is fundamental to understanding the power of genre. And therefore, and this is a key point, to get the full dramatic punch in your story, you have to hit all the plot beats of your particular genres. And that may be up to 45 genre beats. Now here are the 10 major fiction genres that make up 99% of all books sold in the world. Horror, fantasy, science fiction, part of the speculative fiction family. Myth and action, which are also connected. Detective mystery, crime, and thriller, all part of the crime family. Comedy, romance, love, and any combination of genres known as mixed genre. Now today I'm going to explain how each of the major genres works under the surface. And for each genre, I'm going to tell you, first of all, the desire line of that form, meaning what your hero wants in the story. And what you do is you simply match your hero's goal with one of the genre goals. This will give you the main plot line of your story. 2, I will tell you the key question of each form. Each genre asks a key question that must be answered by the end of the story. And this focuses your theme. 3rd, I will tell you 1 or 2 structural techniques you have to know to write a great story in that form. And these are even deeper than the plot beats of each genre. They are the foundation elements on which each genre rests. So you have to get these right to make the story really pay off. Now, quick caution, I'm barely scratching the surface here with the limited time that we have. Each genre is a complex story system, which is why I normally do a one-day class on each one, where I talk about the 10 to 15 unique plot beats and how to execute them, and the beats for all the major subgenres, like comedy, which has 8 different subgenres. My goal today is to show you the key plot beats that will turn your genre story into a bestseller. Now, to show you how these genres really work, I'm going to be using a story development tool called Blockbuster. Blockbuster shows you how to structure your story, as well as all the techniques and the plot beats of your particular genre. This is the main writing tool that we use in my writer's studio in Los Angeles. Like yesterday, I will be using it today because it's an excellent tool for writing a story, and it's an excellent tool for showing you the techniques you need to know to make it a bestseller. Some of the text that you see on screen today is by the original author of Outbreak, which was written using this software. And so this gives us the advantage of seeing how he created this action thriller from the ground up. The first genre we want to explore is horror. By the way, that is not me. Horror stories include It, Get Out, A Quiet Place, Alien, Hereditary, and Jurassic Park. Now, what you see on this screen are all the structural elements that determine what is the best genre to use for your particular story idea. And as you can see, the desire line in horror is simple. It's to defeat a monster, which is both a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because it gives your story a strong spine. It's a weakness because it makes it hard to create much plot. The story keeps hitting the same beat. Hitting the same beat is one of the cardinal sins of plot. The only difference here is how the monster kills. Now, why is horror the first genre? Because it asks the most basic key question, which is what is human and what is inhuman? Horror occurs because we fear the inhuman entering our world. And in better horror stories, we fear seeing the inhuman in ourselves. This leads to the most important plot technique in all of horror. Better horror stories have a structural flip between human and inhuman, meaning that at some point in the story, the monster becomes the hero. And the character that was horrifying and that we thought was inhuman, we find out is humane, while the people are animals trying to destroy what doesn't look like them. This was first done in the greatest of all horror stories, and to this day the greatest, Frankenstein. It's also used in Shape of Water, Get Out, and District 9, which was co-written by Terry Tatchell, who has spoken at this conference in the past and talked about using that very technique as the key to writing the entire script. Plot technique number 2 for great horror: make the monster as intelligent as possible. The more intelligent the monster is, and the more ingenious his plan for defeating the hero, the more plot you have to work with. Now, if horror shows personal devolution, meaning everything shutting down, fantasy shows personal and social evolution, everything opening up. Examples include the Harry Potter stories, Shadow and Bone, A Game of Thrones, Big, Mary Poppins. The desire is to explore an imaginary world. And the key question, how do you live with style and freedom? In other words, how do you make life itself a work of art? That's why fantasy is so powerful, because that's what it's really telling us. Plot technique number 1 is the fantasy story strategy. In classic fantasy, the hero goes on a journey from mundane to fantastical and back to mundane. This leads to plot technique number 2. The hero must start with a weakness in the mundane world. You must establish that internal weakness in the hero before they go to the fantasy world, because without that weakness, the fantasy makes no sense. And that leads to plot technique number 3. Make sure the fantastical world solves the weakness the hero had in the mundane world, so that when she returns home, first, she solved her personal problem, and second, the mundane world has become a playground. We see a perfect example of this three-part journey in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. He starts off in the mundane world, living with his Muggles family that are all about money. He goes to the fantastical world at Hogwarts, where he solves his personal problem, his personal weakness, at least up till that point. And then he returns home. But the switch is that instead of going back to his old home, he's found a new home at Hogwarts. Now, the plot techniques I've just mentioned are for classic fantasy, which is the foundation fantasy form. This is not the case in urban fantasy. It goes from mundane to fantastical, but it doesn't do it in a three-part sequence. It does it throughout the story, which gives you more freedom, but you lose some of the structural and thematic power. Now, science fiction is the most creative of all the genres. You create everything. Science fiction shows social and universal evolution. So notice he's taken fantasy to another level. Social and universal evolution, which is why science fiction stories are usually epics. And that's why science fiction is sometimes referred to as social philosophy in fiction form. Science fiction stories include Dune, I, Robot, and The Handmaid's Tale. Now, the desire is to deal with the tools of the world. Notice we're highlighting the technological aspect of the story world. And the key question is, how do you create a better world? Now, there's a key point that is very important to understand about science fiction, which is that it is not about predicting the future, as is commonly thought. It's about looking at the present world through a different lens. And this leads to plot technique number one. You want to create a recognizable world so that the viewer sees it's different from my world, but it's still my world. A good example of this is in the film Inception, where we see the very recognizable city of Paris suddenly fold in on top of itself. Plot technique number two. The world isn't just the future in time. It's a new evolutionary stage. It's a new stage of social development. For example, The Matrix, society has moved to a new stage. Here, machines rule, and they create a fake human world to keep people enslaved. Now, myth is the foundation for more bestsellers and blockbuster movies than any other form. But it's almost always combined with one or two other genres, and we're going to talk about mixing genres a little later. And this serves to update and unify the myth, which tends to be a very episodic form. Myth stories include Avatar, Avengers, Star Wars, Hunger Games, X-Men, Lord of the Rings. Desire is to go on a journey, ultimately leading to oneself. And the key question? What is your destiny? What were you born to do? Now, myth techniques come from the biggest challenges you face in making the myth story work. And the first of these is a slow start. Myth often starts with the birth of the hero, so we have to go through this boring childhood period before the journey can really begin. So plot technique number one is start the story with the rebirth of the hero. We see this at the beginning of Avatar when the hero is reborn in his Na'vi body. And this is the first of 3 rebirths that he goes through. The action story is the modern outgrowth of the myth form. Stories include the Bourne series, John Wick, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The desire is to engage in combat. And the key question, freedom versus life. To stand and fight, or to flee and live to fight another day. And of course, in action, the hero always chooses to fight for freedom and what he or she believes in. By the way, I can do that. I choose not to. I will not be doing that today. Maybe tomorrow. Join me for that class. The most important plot technique for action is to give your hero a psychological and moral weakness. For decades, it was thought that the action hero had to be a paragon of virtue. That was a wrong idea. Instead, you want to give your action hero as many flaws as possible. Now, James Bond was the most popular superhero of the 20th century. And when they rebooted the franchise in Casino Royale, they rejuvenated by taking Bond's greatest strength, the fact that he's the ultimate ladies' man, and turn it into a psychological and moral flaw. This character was cold and voracious, and women were getting killed because of it. The result of this more real superhero, that film was a massive hit. Now, the detective story or mystery is the first genre in the crime family. Examples include A is for Alibi, that entire series of books, Devil in a Blue Dress, Knives Out, and LA Confidential. The desire is to find the truth, usually about a murder. The key question, who is guilty and who is innocent? The key point here is in any genre story, push the key question as far as you can. And in mystery, if we do that, whose guilt do we question? The detective should question themselves, although this is rarely done and is a mark of great stories when it is done. Now, plot technique 1 is the key plot structure. We want to go from a small corruption to a large corruption. Classic example is Chinatown. Chinatown does not begin as a murder mystery. It begins as an adultery case, which leads to murder, which leads to the discovery of rape and incest, which leads to the discovery that the entire city of Los Angeles is built on a corrupt land deal. By the way, that film is based on a true story. That's exactly what Los Angeles was built on. Therefore, plot technique number 2 is always start at the end. Figure out the big corruption first, then work backwards to see what the insignificant thread is that will unravel the larger corruption. Now, crime is a broad category of stories that puts less emphasis on detecting the criminal and more on the battle between criminal and lawman. Examples include The Usual Suspects, Pulp Fiction, Fargo, Breaking Bad. The desire to catch a criminal. And the key question? Who is allowed to live above the law? Now, plot technique 1, and the most important technique in crime, is make both guys great and both guys equal. A good crime story is a heavyweight fight between the criminal and the lawman. We want the two best in their field. Best criminal against best lawman, and we want them evenly matched. Because this gives us great punch, counterpunch, which is crucial to building the middle of the story. Punch, counterpunch. If either character is too strong, the fight ends in the first round, and the story dies. Plot technique number 2 is the final reveal. Ideally, you want the biggest reveal to come at the very end of the story. And of course, the best example ever of that is The Usual Suspects. Now, thriller is a detective story in which the detective, or just the hero acting like a detective, becomes the victim and is in great danger. The Girl on the Train, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Michael Clayton in Silence of the Lambs. The desire is to investigate while escaping attack. And the key question, is your suspicion justified? Now, plot technique number 1. There are 2 lines that you have to track in your story: the personal and the crime. This leads to a key point. You have to show how the hero's psychological and moral weakness will be solved by uncovering the crime. In other words, we're going to connect the hero's weakness with the crime. Textbook example of this is the thriller Rear Window. Now, Grace Kelly was the most beautiful woman of the 1950s. This is a scientific fact. You can disagree with me if you want, but you will be wrong. The hero's weakness in this story, get this, he can't commit to marry Grace Kelly. Clearly, the man is not thinking straight. But by solving the murder with her help, he commits to marry her. So he accomplishes 2 tracks. He solves the crime and he fulfills his personal need. Comedy is the most complicated of all the genres. First, because there are so many kinds of comedy. And second, because they're all so different from each other. Bridget Jones' Diary, Little Miss Sunshine, Wedding Crashers, and Legally Blonde. The desire is to gain success or romance with humorous results. And the key question is, do you lie or show your true self? Comedy is all about the facades that people create. And so the course of the comedy is about stripping away those facades to see who the person really is. Plot technique number 1. You can't go from small to big when you're writing a comedy. In other words, you can't start with a bunch of funny lines and then try to create a story. You'll have no narrative drive and the comedy will die. No, you have to go from big to small. Meaning you start with a comic story structure. This is the storyline on which you hang the jokes. And this is how you make the story funnier over the course of the comedy, which is crucial. Which leads to plot technique number 2. There are 8 major comic story structures, and they all have a different sequence of plot beats. They are, and I'm going to try to go through them slowly so you can get them all: myth comedy, action comedy, the buddy story, the traveling angel comedy, romantic comedy, farce, black comedy, and satire. Now, interestingly enough, Little Miss Sunshine is a myth comedy. And it's a comedy that builds the laughs on top of its story structure, which is why the funniest scene in the film, a very funny film, is right at the end. Now, romance is the most choreographed of all the genres, and it's the only one with 2 heroes. It is the most popular form in novels. Examples: Bridgerton, Outlander, The Notebook, The Time Traveler's Wife. The desire is to find love. and specifically to get the love interest. That's obvious. But the key question is, how much can you love? And it will be tested in the story. It better be tested in the story. Plot technique number one is the logic of the love story. The hero has a unique need that can only be fulfilled by one other person in the world. In other words, the lover is the one person the hero must end up with to have their best life, and vice versa. Love stories are all about blossoming. Therefore, plot technique number two is make sure both characters start the story closed down. And they're closed down specifically about love. They cannot love. And this leads to plot technique three. Each is transformed through the other person. Each blossoms because of the heat and light of the other's love. Now, genre rule number two of popular storytelling is that most stories are a combination of 2, 3, sometimes even 4 genres. And why is that the case now? It's universal. Because when you combine 2 genres, you double the number of plot beats in the story. And that is a tremendous advantage. Now, because of Rule 2, you want to base your story on a mix of 2 to 3 genres. This is one of the most important strategies for writing a best-selling novel in today's market. Let me add one caveat. One of those genres must be the primary form. So if anybody asks you, what's your genre? You tell them that primary form. But it is a mix of 2 or 3. Here are some popular mixed genre stories. Harry Potter, fantasy, myth, horror, coming-of-age English schoolboy. Yes, that is a genre. Hunger Games, myth, science fiction, action. Lord of the Rings, myth, fantasy, and action. Now, as you can see, I've barely scratched the surface of how to write genre stories to get the biggest sales. To create your unique story brand and stand out from the crowd, you need to be the very best in your form. And therefore, you need to pick the right genres for your story ideas. And once you know them, learn those genres cold. I mentioned I normally do a one-day class on each, including the 10 to 15 plot beats, how to execute the subgenres and all of their plot beats, and so on. To that end, I invite you to take a look at the genre classes and software on my website. There I cover all the techniques and the plot beats you need to know. You can learn these techniques, 1, through an audio class, and 2, right on the computer while you apply these techniques to your story using this Blockbuster software. The link there is truby.com/members/Vegas 2023. There is a 20Books Vegas discount of up to 70%. This discount is available for a limited time and only to people attending this conference. To get it, you do need to use that coupon Vegas 2023 when you're checking out. And I will guarantee you that if you listen and re-listen to these classes, do it slowly, apply the techniques. If you do that, you will elevate your story to the highest professional level fast. A quick note, if you want to purchase any of the genre add-on software, you also have to get the main Blockbuster program, but you only need to get it once. Now, in the time that we have, are there any questions? And any questions that we can't get to by the end of the 45 minutes, I will be outside and we'll talk story with you as long as you want. and talk about your story if you want. Any questions in any of the genres that we've talked about today?
Hi, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question
Yeah.
about the Jurassic Park. You clarified it, or you classified it as horror,
Yeah.
but it's like often like said to be science fiction. So like, would it be a mix, or like, what was your take on that?
It is a mix, and keep in mind that I mentioned that Frankenstein is the greatest horror story ever. It is also the first and greatest science fiction. They're very often connected, and Jurassic Park is a perfect example of that. And it's an example of a science fiction story in which the created world by the brilliant scientist was really a dumb idea.
All right, thank you.
Hi. In your book, Anatomy of Genre, you mentioned that a lot of authors kind of create chaos when they try and mix multiple genres. I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on like the biggest pitfalls to avoid when mixing genres?
Sure. It's a great question. The reason that writers have so much trouble mixing genres is because each genre has attached to it automatically a set hero, a main opponent, certain genre beats, all kinds of elements that come with each form. And when they mix it, they tend to have too many heroes, too many opponents, and so on and so forth. And this is why I had mentioned that caveat just a minute ago. When you mix genres, it is essential that you choose one genre to be the primary form. That will tell you your hero, your main opponent, the main desire line, and the main genre beats that you must hit. Now, you may use the genre beats of the other two genres, but only if they work with the genre beats of the primary form. That's the key to making it work. If you do that, and if you choose the correct genre to be the primary genre, you'll be in good shape. Yes?
Do you have any thoughts about historical fiction as fitting within a genre and beats, or does one have to basically be a Don DeLillo or a T.C. Boyle to pull that off?
Well, the answer is both. Historical fiction is one of the most complex of all genres. And part of the reason it's so complex is that you can have historical fiction along with any number of other genres. For example, you can do it with action, you can do it with detective, obviously a Western and so on. So it's in that sense, it is not considered one of the technical genres. It's really a combination of forms. I talk about it in my Anatomy of Genres book, believe it or not, in the gangster form, because the gangster form is the genre that is most like the great American novel. And the great American novel has a lot of similarities with the genre beats in historical fiction when you're writing historical fiction at the highest level. So I would recommend that you take a look at that. Yeah. It's by the way, it's a form I love. I love it. Yeah.
Hi. How do you continue to surprise readers who are very well accustomed to specific genre?
You just put your finger on the biggest plot problem there is. And the way that, unfortunately, the answer is very complicated. And it has to do with a lot of what I talked about in the class yesterday, how to become a plot magician. Surprise comes from reveals. People for years have been talking about plot beats. Plot beat, it's a meaningless term. What is a plot beat? Well, it's where the plot turns. Really? Well, where is that? We kind of know it when we see it, but here's what it really is. It's when a reveal happens. Reveal is when the hero, most of the time, it's when the hero gets a new insight about what the opponent is doing under the surface. And this is why one of the key techniques I talked about yesterday is when you're figuring out the plot, always start with the opponent's plan. That's the trick to plot right there. Because the opponent will have a plan that will include a number of hidden attacks against the hero. And those attacks will build. And every time one of those hidden attacks hits, what is that from the point of view of the hero and the point of view of the reader? It's a reveal. Bingo, I've got plot. It's a quick and dirty answer to, an entire book that I've written on it, but because plot is the most difficult of all skills for writers to get. But if you master that skill, you will have no competition. It's that important. Yes.
A question from our streaming audience is, are there any genres that shouldn't be mixed?
There are certain genres that are difficult to mix, which is why we don't normally see them mixed. But that's precisely the genres that I want to look at. Because I want to see, if nobody else has done it, that means there's a lot of room, right? We all know the problem that we have in writing indie novels is that there's thousands of writers, not only in the genres, but in all the subgenres and all the sub-subgenres and so on. So if you can find certain genres that you can mix that are not normally mixed, let me give you an example of that. Inception. Inception is a science fiction heist story. Nobody ever did that before, at least in my knowledge. They never did it before. So all of a sudden, wow, that was really cool. I've never seen it before. So think about genres that are not normally together that you are interested in, that you think would make a great story. And that's a way to explore it. It doesn't mean you write that. You got to explore it to see if it will work, because there's a reason that certain genres are not mixed, because they're opposites. They're on either end of the genre spectrum. But look at it, explore it, yes.
Okay, so I'm on your website and I see that you can get a bundle of, say, 3 or 6, and that leads me to a question. The best-selling formula is a mix of 2 to 3 different genres. Is there one kind of like anchor special genre that is more popular? I feel like when I looked at your screen, you did Hunger Games and a couple of other really popular books, and they all had myth. So is that one that you see?
Myth is the most popular of all genres,
Okay.
without question. But that doesn't mean it's right for you. Here's the trick. Don't start from the genre and say, well, can I figure out a story? Start with a story idea that's really intriguing to you and say, well, what are the genres that are buried in it? They're all popular. All 10 that I showed you, they're all great. They're all popular. The question is, does it work for your story idea, and can you mix them well? Yes?
Another online question is, are they correct in assuming these genre beats would be applicable in children's stories, middle grade stories as well?
They are, but with a lot of caveats. And the reason is that one of the things that determines how a children's story works is the age of the child hero. Because there are certain ages below which you cannot give that character a moral flaw. About the youngest you can give a character a moral flaw, by which it means they are responsible for how they hurt other people. The earliest you can do it is about 13. And so any younger than that, you're going to have characters who are just exploring. They're going to work through the beats, but the internal flaw is not going to be as serious. Okay, one more question.
Do you feel these genres are universal between screenplays and novels? I mean, is there some genres that work for one medium that won't work for another?
The answer is yes and no. They are universal in all the mediums, absolutely. But different mediums manipulate them in certain very special ways. The quick answer is that movies have the least complex plot of the 3 major forms: novel, television, and film. TV and novels have the most complex plot that has to extend over the longest period of time. And when you extend plot over a long period of time, that can change the genre fairly radically. I wish I could give you an answer of which specific genres get changed the most and so on, but the simple answer is yes, these genres are universal in all the different mediums, and the changes are relatively minor compared to the main thrust of what those genre beats will do. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here.